This is Summer Queen Problems. Thank you for watching. I am Kevin England. In this lesson, we'll bring awareness that sometimes queen problems can occur in first-year colony startups. We'll explore a couple of the key root causes and provide some insight on indicators that should tip you off. We'll also emphasize that you should strive to learn what is normal so that you can recognize when something goes astray. To cap off the lesson, we will talk about how to respond should you encounter a problem. This lesson starts with an acknowledgement that every year we receive reports from first-year beekeepers of colonies that experience queen problems. It is not a widespread problem, but it is significant enough to show up to be a reasonable percentage of startups, and it warrants a lesson to review the dynamics. While problems with honeybee queens can vary, the two most common ones we see for new startups are queens that are not well mated, and at the opposite end of the spectrum, queens that are at the end of their fertility windows. We will explore both of these dynamics as the lesson continues. Before talking about problems, we want to take a moment to recognize what is normal. If you take the time to lock in what a colony should be doing when things are normal, then in those times when it's not, it makes it easier to recognize when things are going astray. So with that in mind, a colony coming out of spring at the time that the nectar flow is tapering off will slow down brood production. New beekeepers who are used to seeing very productive new bee production may recognize this change when the queen slows down and become concerned or alarmed by this. This image represents a rather typical frame of bees being reared during the height of the season. It is flush with resources and has a large complement of bees in production. In contrast, a similar frame later in the season might show a smaller complement of bees being reared, or even hardly any at all. This is a byproduct of a slowdown of resources coming into the hive and is very typical. In this image, however, we still see that the queen is laying in a tight pattern of bees with a contiguous swath of bees right next to each other. Patterns tend to become a little less structured for various reasons as the season progresses, but the queen should still produce brood patterns in a relatively compact swath across the brood production area. As a beekeeper, take the time to examine the brood area and take in what the queen is doing over the progression of the season so you can lock in what is normal. Now let's take the time to explore what can go wrong and understand how that might change what the interior of the brood nest might look like as a result. We'll start with the reminder that sometimes queens that are supplied with packages fail due to insufficient mating. Whether it was poor weather, lack of drones, or some other root cause problem, the net result is that some queens fail due to a flaw in their mating nuptials. An average queen should be mated with at least 15 drones, and the numbers can go significantly higher than that. But you need to recognize that they can also go significantly lower than that, and this is where a queen can run into problems. It happens with a small percentage of package installations every year. On the opposite end of the spectrum, maybe you started the year out with a nucleus colony. One thing that we have learned through experience is that a queen remains viable for an average window of 2 to 3 years. If your queen was a second-year queen when you purchased your nucleus colony, then it would come to pass that partway through the year your queen will falter because she's depleting her storehouse of sperm collected from her nuptial flights. Keeping those two potential causes in mind, one of the more prevalent indicators of a queen problem is the queen's inability to maintain a good egg laying pattern. A moment ago, we showed you some images of what normal brood production looks like. If your queen's brood production presents in a different manner, you should take a note of that and keep an eye on the queen's performance. You want to examine the backstory of your colony and determine if there are some other causes that can explain what you're seeing. For example, if you just finished a round of varroamite treatments that could potentially have led to different brood patterns. Trace your steps and try to examine what's going on in your colony. If you traced your steps back and you can't find a reason for a change in the brood patterns, and you happen to open your hive and you see something like this, a spotty shotgun brood pattern that is not normal. Remember, it's supposed to be tight concentric areas. Then you should be assessing the situation. Do you have a varroamite problem and there's high hygiene going on? Or is this your queen faltering in performance? One of the things about varroamite problems and or queen performance problems during the summer is if it was just a one-off thing that created a pattern like the one you see, usually the queen cleans that up in the next round of laying. You'll see a better pattern. If, however, this continues through the summer, then you're going to have to keep an eye towards considering a replacement because something's going on and you should not be seeing this behavior progress through the season. If you open your colony and you happen to observe queen producing drones in worker brood, and that presents with cappings that have bulbous shapes because the drone doesn't fit into the worker cell and everything protrudes beyond the face, resulting in a bullet-shaped capping instead of the flat paper bag look that you see when it is normal. This is a sure sign of a queen problem. It is the queen not fertilizing the egg and it's being deposited in worker cells, resulting in a drone. If you see this, you require a queen replacement, and this is something that a beekeeper who started with a nucleus colony should be on the watch for the remainder of the first year, especially if you had a second-year queen. This is also something that occurs with packaged queens that, as we discussed earlier, are insufficiently mated with a large contingent of drones and they run out of materials to fertilize the egg. There's one other indicator that we suggest you keep an eye on during the summer and progression into fall. It is customary for colonies to produce large contingents of drones during the spring nectar flow. What is also normal is that drone production retracts, or it ceases altogether as spring turns to summer. If you happen to have a colony that seems to be continuing to produce a large contingent of drones as summer progresses, you're seeing a lot of drones in the colony population. You should be doing a full inspection of your frames to see if something is going on that is resulting in your queen producing a high population of drones. It is our experience that this is a possible precursor to a queen problem manifesting within the colony. It almost seems like they produce a lot of drones in anticipation of potentially producing queen cells to replace the queen as part of the queen faltering event manifesting. A lot of you might fret over hearing all of this and start to manifest that you're having problems. Let's come back to center and encourage you to take the time to observe how the colony is performing when times are good, and remind you that the vast majority of beekeepers will not experience problems. So it makes an optimal time for you to become accustomed to what good looks like. And then, when you learn that, you will pick up on when something seems a little off. As a new beekeeper, take the time to look at the bees and the frames and how the colony is operating. Observe how the colony operates, and then after each inspection, write your observations out so that at a later time, if you're looking at something that looks a little strange, you could fall back to your notes of what you observed and use that as a reference in times of uncertainty about whether you have a problem or not. Trust us that we will tell you this will pay dividends in future years when you're seeing something that's not quite right and you're trying to formulate a plan and you have some evidence to bounce against in order to have an input into your decision-making process about whether you truly have a problem or not. It has to be said that sometimes the bees will recognize the problem before you do and start off to replace their queen. If you find that the colony starts to produce a charged queen cell, you have a decision to make. If it's early in the season, talking about early summer, then maybe you can let it run its course and the bees will produce a new queen in a sufficient time frame for the queen to take the helm and still get the colony prepared for overwintering. However, if a queen replacement takes place during the window where bees should be producing the contingent of winter bees, that may actually end up setting the colony back when you would allow the replacement to run its course. While they are mustering to right the situation, they should really be producing the winter population. Now, this is a judgment call on your part, but the deeper you get into the season, the more strategic it would be for you to override what the bees are doing and install a purchase queen that is mated and would get back to the job of producing your winter bees for your colony. One additional thing to keep in mind is you should be inspecting your colonies periodically through summer, and especially after you do varroa mite treatments. As you read the cautions on varroa mite treatments, some of them indicate that they can cause harm to the colony population, including the queen. If for some reason the queen is damaged, it would likely manifest in the bees trying to rear replacement queens and you would see queen cells. Do keep an eye on colonies, especially after treatments, to ensure that it has done no harm, and if something goes wrong, you can pick up on it quickly. Again, we will remind you to close the topic that you must remain vigilant throughout the summer, as it's to your benefit to identify any queen problems as early in the season as possible. Recovery from problems goes so much better if you can catch it early and give the colony as much time as possible to rebound from any challenges in a critical time, especially as they're mustering to build winter bees. You should also consider the dynamic that obtaining quality queens becomes infinitely more difficult as the season progresses into fall. You will want to be ahead of the curve when it comes to procuring a replacement queen while they are still reasonably available, and there is nothing more frustrating than having to make a billion phone calls trying to find someone who can supply you a queen in a time of duress. In this lesson, we emphasized maintaining vigilance in ensuring that your colony keeps an operational queen, and being proactive to take action should problems arise. Our next lessons focus on some summer dynamics, including the basics of honeybee robbing and how to address that situation if it occurs, learning of mite infestations in late summer and early fall, and some housekeeping rules about how to support colonies that may be having problems getting to the right footprint for going into winter. We're going to close out the summer run with getting you prepared to collapse your colonies in preparation for winter. If you have questions about this presentation or any of the content, you can ask at our next online session. You can also send an email to the address on the slide. If you're watching from YouTube, you can leave a comment below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you at the next lesson.